Breaking news! A new episode of Let's Be Frank starting now!
Hello all! Today we're going deep under the water and focusing solely on the monsters of the deep. There are hundreds upon millions of creatures under the water we know little to nothing about. But I guarantee you the 5 creatures we talk about today are all super cool, super unique, and very weird. I tried to pick 5 creatures that are nothing alike. They're all completely different in their own way, and I hope you enjoy, and I hope, most of all, you learn something new. So without further ado, let's go ahead, dive down, and start talking about today's first creature. Let's go ahead and start with the creature I think you're all going to be pretty familiar with, the right whale. I'm sure you've seen videos on the internet, or heck, maybe in person, of whales, I believe it's called, and then falling back in and making a huge splash. Now, do you know why they do that? They're trying to communicate with other right whales. Isn't that interesting? And I know you've all heard the whale song. It sounds sort of like was that good? Was that a good imitation? Now, this is just another form of communication. Probably a more main form of communication than making splashes. Splashes are more to alert. I feel like the moaning and the belching is more to call, especially when there's food nearby. If a right whale has found a lot of food, it's going to want to alert other right whales to come to its location for the feast. Now, we're going to be talking about some pretty big creatures today. Not all of them, but some of them are pretty big. A right whale, we're talking big here. A right whale can get up to 60 feet long, and that's pretty long, but we can wrap our heads around that. Now, what's a lot harder to understand is that it can get up, weight-wise, to 235,000 pounds. You look at a whale and you can understand that it's going to be heavy, but that is just an unfathomable number. It's absurd. Now, another fact you're probably all aware of, even though it's so big, it only eats the smallest possible things in the ocean, and that's things like plankton. All those little teeth that they have, well, they're not actually teeth. The card's describing them as dinner plate type things, but the correct word is they're baleen. You know, we have teeth, they have baleen. And it's able to let in all that seawater and let it all back out, while tiny little hairs catch all these plankton and keep them inside the mouth. And obviously, because of its size, a right whale is going to have to eat a lot of plankton. So it's constantly filtering that water in and out, especially when there's just a large grouping of them. So something about right whales you may not have known: they are all born with patches of rough skin called, and I think I'm pronouncing this right, callosities, perhaps? And scientists use this to identify different right whales, to tell them apart and everything. And they do believe the whales use these rough patches to identify each other sometimes. I'm sure there are other ways in the whale brain they use to identify other whales and who they are, separate them from each other. But these callosities, or what did the card say? It refers to them as callosity patterns as well. So these callosity patterns can also help with the identification. But let me tell you, we have got a lot more unique creatures to start talking about. I know this was a fast one, but let's go ahead and move on to our next monster of the deep. Next up, we have the cuttlefish. Cute little guy, right? Maybe not in the image you're seeing here, but, you know, typically you think about a cuttlefish, they're kind of cute. Don't let that cute demeanor fool you, though. These things are crafty hunters, okay? They are able to camouflage and quickly sneak up on prey, and they even can shoot ink like a squid. They're both cephalopods, so they're related, like cousins. So these guys are a lot smaller than the right whale. They can get up to about 20 inches long and somewhere around 26 pounds. And that seems to be like a decent sized one. Fun fact about these guys, they're also delicious. A long while ago on the channel, Joachim and I, for a Taboo Foods video, actually cooked cuttlefish. We made garlic and chili cuttlefish. And spoiler alert for the video, it turned out amazing. If you want to see kind of what we did to cook with it and see our genuine reactions to how good it was, why don't you go watch that video after this one. But speaking of eating, the cuttlefish diet mainly consists of things like small fish, crabs, and unfortunately their very young cousins, the squids. That's just wrong, man. And if you don't kill these guys and eat them yourself, they can live up to about 5 years, which isn't a super long time. I want to read this next part straight from the card, because this is a lot of cool information here, so check this out. Cuttlefish have chromatophores in their skin that help them change their appearance drastically. These creatures can instantly alter the color of their skin, texture themselves with spots, blotches, and stripes, and raise small bumps on their flesh. Cuttlefish can change their looks in a split second, either to communicate with each other or to blend in with their surroundings so they can creep up on prey and also hide from enemies. That's so cool. I mean, you guys saw the video I just showed. It blows my mind that they can do this. This is amazing, you guys. These cuttlefish are beautiful, beautiful animals. Cephalopods, whatever you want to call them. They're amazing. And just seeing them change colors like this, it blows my mind. One more fun fact about these guys. Whenever they're laying their eggs, a lot of times the mother will cover the eggs in ink to disguise them, making them look like pebbles instead of food. Not only is that a really intelligent thing to do, but we just talked about how the cuttlefish can like change its texture and its patterns and its color and everything. And it already does that to its young. At such a young age, these cuttlefish are already having their colors changed to blend in. I don't know, man. I think cuttlefish are super cool. I would love to have a pet cuttlefish, but at the same time, I just want to keep eating them. Don't forget, check out that Taboo Foods video, garlic and chili cuttlefish. It tasted amazing. I know I'm kind of riding the line of, oh, these creatures are so intelligent and cool. And then I'm also talking about eating them. But hey, we do the same thing with pigs, right? Oh, mankind, you are a weird creature. And wild. Isn't that funny? Oh man, if only we as man were in these decks. Wouldn't that be a cool entry? But we're not talking about humans. We're talking about things that live under the ocean. So let us move on to our next creature. Alright, I am almost positive you have never seen one of these things before in your life, unless you're a marine biologist or something. Say hello to the giant Siphonophore. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Now these giant jellyfish live incredibly deep below the water. Like I'm talking like 3,300 feet below the water surface. And in practically every sea at that. Now, how long do these guys get? As you can see on the card, I'm guessing you can see, they look pretty long, but how long exactly? 140 feet. I am not kidding. Isn't that crazy? They have thousands upon thousands of little stingers that just zigzag and wind throughout the water. So deep, no light penetrates there. They're the only things giving off any form of light. And whenever something touches those stingers, they're paralyzed, and the giant Siphonophore can feast. Now, truth be told, the giant Siphonophore is kind of cheating. It didn't get that long just by growing. No. It's actually made up of dozens and dozens of other smaller organisms. The ones that make up the bell, the head of the creature, they're in charge of things like swimming and reproduction. Whereas all the other ones that make up the stingers, they're in charge of hunting prey. This is not a one-minded thing, if you can even say it has a mind. This is an entire series of organisms working together. I mentioned this thing was long, about 140-ish feet, but its diameter is only that of a quarter. Like, it's small, but long. It's actually the longest living organism in the world, that we know about at least. That's so scary. So believe it or not, the man-o-war jellyfish is actually, in and of itself, its own Siphonophore, but a little bit different than the giant Siphonophore. The man-o-war is definitely a colony of other little organisms all together, but its head is gas-filled, allowing it to float above the surface, you know? You've seen a man-o-war before. Alright, moving past something this long, which, trust me, we'll get back to long things in a little bit, let's touch on our fourth monster of the deep, something I could hold in my hands. Allow me to introduce you to the chambered Nautilus. This guy is so cool. I love the Nautilus. It's so weird, right? It's got this little shell it just kind of pops out of and everything, and it lives so deep below the ocean. Not as deep as the giant Siphonophore, but like 2,000 feet below the water surface. But when it's time to feed, it'll rise up in the evening, eat as much as it wants, eat its fill, and then sink back down to the bottom. It definitely prefers to spend its time in the darkness. I mean, it truly is covered on all sides. If a predator is trying to attack it, it can pull itself completely into its shell and shut the door. So it's surrounded on all sides, unlike that of like a snail or something. And on top of that, when the prey becomes predator and it's hunting something, it can just barely poke out of that shell until some prey swims by, a crab or a fish or something. And when the time is right, it opens up and tentacles fly out and grab it, and it starts eating. Isn't that kind of cool? It's an ambush predator. So the Nautilus kind of taught mankind how to make a submarine. It functions in the exact same way. Whenever it wants to rise up to the surface, it blows water out of its shell, creating more air inside of itself than water, making it more buoyant, making it rise. But when it's time to sink back down to the very bottom, it'll draw in water. And that's kind of what submarines do. They draw in and let out water so they can just kind of stay exactly where they want. They can sink, they can raise, they can sail right down the middle. This is the submarine of nature. That's why so many different submarines have been named the Nautilus. I think most famously, Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, his submarine, Captain Nemo's submarine, was named the Nautilus. But sadly, the Nautilus can't see very well. The card says its eyes are primitive. It's kind of just like a little pinhole. So it uses its other senses to detect when prey is around. It can smell out prey. But it's still able to grab very fast with those tentacles. So as long as it's in, generally in front of it, it's got it. No trouble at all. I almost forgot to tell you guys how long it is. A Nautilus is about a foot long, so maybe something about that. And it can live for about 15 years. So that's a pretty decent lifespan. We just talked about the Cuttlefish getting 5, so that's another point for the Nautilus. I've never eaten a Nautilus, though. Maybe I should. Let's move on before I start getting too hungry just staring at this guy. And let's talk about our final monster of the deep. So typically, in any Weird and Wild Creatures video that isn't on a specific category of card, like this one, I save the monsters of the mind for last. And this creature is it's real, I promise you that, but it's most like the monsters of the mind. The oarfish has terrified sailors and captains of the sea for millennia. For as long as there have been people traversing the sea, this giant sea serpent-like creature has been the stuff of myth and legend. Let me just make sure you're getting a good, proper look at this thing. I mean, the oarfish is genuinely terrifying. However, it's harmless. It is not going to hurt us humans whatsoever. This real life basilisk of the sea, it's just another fish. It's just really long. Speaking of its length, it's about 56 feet long. And with all that length, even though it's thin, there still comes a lot of weight. It can get up to 660 pounds. That's not as heavy as the right whale, not even close, but for something so thin, that's crazy. That's a big fish. We've only been able to really study the oarfish in generally recent years. These cards came out maybe 15 years ago, probably a little more. So recent years is going to be a very dated phrasing soon. But really, within the past, let's say 30, 40, 50 years, that's all the time we've really had to study the oarfish. We've had so little time, as a matter of fact, the card doesn't even give us a proper lifespan. The lifespan's unknown as far as this Weird and Wild Creature card is concerned. So I said it can get up to about 56 feet long, which is true. A 56-footer has been reported. But typically 16 and a half to like 26 feet is about what you can expect for the average. So a bit shorter, well, I say shorter, 26 feet is still very long. Very, very long, but it ain't 56, you know? And here's a weird fact about the oarfish. Apparently, it's been observed swimming vertically. Like, obviously here on the card, you see it's kind of swimming like a snake would slither on land. But I guess the oarfish does what it wants and it can just brrr throughout the water. So before you get kind of confused, right over here, this is the oarfish larva. Like, it's going to start swimming and opening its giant toothless jaw to swallow prey as soon as it's in this larval state, as soon as it's hatched. But this is not fully grown. I was confused at first too. I'm like, I've seen oarfish in videos. This isn't what they look like. It is pretty hard to see these things too, by the way. They, like a lot of the things we've talked about today, live so deep that the sun don't shine and we would be crushed by the pressure. About 3,000 feet below the surface. I keep wanting to say the Earth's surface, but it's the water's surface. You never hear these guys talk about because so little is known about them. But listen, y'all, if you enjoyed this video, why don't you give it a like and subscribe if you have not already. This is it, hey, another Weird and Wild Creatures video come and gone. Whenever I talk about, let me move to the center here, a specific category, I like to make it a little bit shorter than the average 7 category, video. But do you guys prefer when I kind of talk about a category, or do you like when I mention one of every category? Let me know down in the comments. I'm genuinely curious. I kind of like to bounce back and forth, but I'd love to hear your input. Follow my Instagram and Facebook at Let'sBeFrank2020, and go follow mine and Jokum's podcast, Certified Poke Moments, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. We talk about a new Pokemon evolution line every single week. Stats, movesets. If you like Pokemon, you're gonna like this podcast. With all that being said, once again, thank you so very much for watching, and until next time.